As Peter was mentioning, we were brought on board to focus, in this particular case, on performing a market analysis, again, looking at the real estate environment, socioeconomics, labor and industry trends, and so forth. And do I have a clicker?
I do.
Okay, you have the clicker. All right, so just very quickly, and for those of you who are not familiar, this is all really predicated on a high-speed rail line, obviously being built from Springfield to Hartford, and what that is going to unlock. We actually performed a TOD analysis, large market study for the city of Meriden a few years ago in anticipation of the high-speed rail line, and they're currently underway. We did everything from the market study to financial feasibility, fiscal impact analysis, as well as land acquisition strategy. Most of those same things we are doing for this particular study. Meriden is now underway in terms of doing acquisition and redevelopment of the properties along the station route, and there's also capital investment taking place there as well. This is just a map showing you the different rail stops that will be accessible off the high-speed rail line in general. But here's what happens is when you open up this opportunity with transit, in this case high-speed rail, you attract a lot more investment and a lot more demand from people that want to live next to it to get to to work and kind of ditch the car, to private developers who want to take advantage of the opportunity of everybody that wants to jump on a train or live next to a train or even work next to a train. So it starts to really create a lot of demand and buzz. And what we found, and certainly the literature out there that's done research on this, and TOD has been around for more than a quarter of a century, but it's really taken hold in the last 10 to 15 years, is that this is kind of the next frontier where a lot of people want to live, right? We've gone through the start of this country where we lived in an agrarian society, then we moved to cities when we had the Industrial Revolution, and then with the interstate highway system we moved out to suburbia, and now it seems to be swinging back to urbanized areas. Well, those urbanized areas have become more attractive in particular because of transit. And your particular town, in Thompsonville in particular, where this study is taking place, is about to have its opportunity in the spotlight. All right, so this is what this is really all about. Next. So, talked about what we came on board, or we're on board to do the market study. This is a kind of a quick snapshot of our scope of services. So, phase one, we are calling it first things first. We are doing background review, or have done background review of existing reports and materials. We've done our site tour. I've actually toured the site several times. And also doing something referred to as improvement to land value analysis, where we're looking at potential redevelopment sites within about a half mile of the train station site. And I'm going to show you kind of what that map looks like in a second. Phase two is understanding the market. This is where we kind of roll up our sleeves and we do our traditional socioeconomic real estate analysis, labor and industry analysis. So we're crunching numbers. We've also had interviews with real estate developer or real estate brokers and knowledgeable real estate professionals about what they see happening in the marketplace. We've done a really deep dive into the real estate metrics, into the demographic trends that are happening. So this gives us a good understanding of who's moving to the area, what types of housing are they living in, what types of goods and services are in demand or not, how are labor and industry trends trending. That's important because that will have influence on the type of commercial development that will happen in the future, office space and where that office space wants to locate. Phase three we're calling Let's Talk, and in that particular phase, which we're about to enter, one of the big things that we are doing is we have a sub-consultant, Great Blue is the firm, which is based in Meriden, and they are a survey research firm, and they will be doing telephone interviews. So if you get a phone call sometime in September or October, which is when they're going to start doing their thing, they are doing a random sample telephone survey, which will include cell phones, by the way, so you won't be excluded for those of you who do not have a landline, to ask questions about this area, your opinions about what could make it better, what would entice you to move closer to a rail station in Thompsonville, and so forth. We will also be doing focus groups with key stakeholders in the area, particularly elected and appointed officials, business representatives. Michael, I'm forgetting all the other people we're going to be interviewing, but it's a good cross-section of those who really represent the interest of this area. And in phase 4, we're calling time to crunch numbers, which is really, at that point, what we've identified as being market supportable in terms of residential, commercial, real estate development there. We want to, test, is it really viable? And when we say test it, I want to put on my hat as if I were a developer. And we do a lot of work for developers, so we kind of know how they think, and we do their financial analysis. So we crunch these numbers to say, well, the market's there, but can I make enough money to build this? Because it's one thing to say there's demand for something. It's quite another thing to say I can build it and not lose my shirt, okay? That's why we do the crunching of the numbers to say, yep, this is real. And our numbers are used quite often by developers to get bank financing, so we kind of know what they need to say or prove out that something does work. So once we get through that, and I should also say that my colleague here, Francisco, who's kind of on the planning side of things, we're having this iterative process talking this through. So it's not just forward planning and Todd Poole saying this is what you should build. There's a planning aspect to this that also has to be considered, and with that, zoning regulations and so forth. So we're having this kind of back and forth on that. Ultimately, when we come to some type of agreement, and obviously in consultation with your appointed officials on what is the best path forward, we're wrapping up our study with a phase 5 strategic way forward, which is land acquisition strategy, some marketing recommendations, and really this is how you package it and move forward. That's kind of what we're going to end up with. So I talked about map. What you have here on the left is the 1.5 mile radius around the train station, okay? Now, it's 1.5 miles. I will tell you that typically transit-oriented development really recognizes anywhere from 1/4 to a 1/2 mile radius or radii around a particular rail station. That's typically representing a 5 to 10 minute walk, right? You can walk a 1/4 mile in about 5 minutes, about 1/2 mile in 10 minutes at a fairly average pace. In this case, it's 1.5 miles for the reasons of capturing the infield mall area, because that is part of your commercial district. So we kind of made that special radii to bring that in, and that's why it is the size that it is. So that's where we were referring to as our base study area, is that 1/2 mile. We also, when we do these analyses, we have comparison geographies to look at, to compare against this base area. In this case, and I'll point this out, we have the 20-minute PMA, which is primary market area. So that's this kind of zigzaggy line right here, and there's our 1/2 mile or 1.5 mile circle. The 20-minute primary market area is typically where you would find roughly 70% of your where people live, work, shop, play, where that activity happens, right? I live here, and within about 20 minutes from here I work, on average, right? We're not saying everybody does. And so we look at that geography, we examine demographics, real estate, labor industry, again, for points of comparison. And then the larger geography that's part of our analysis is what we're referring to as it's actually 2 metros that are smashed together because you are basically right on the Massachusetts line. So we have to recognize that and honor that. So we have 2 metros, Springfield, Massachusetts, Connecticut Metropolitan, and I forget the acronym of NECTA, but that's there, it's a mouthful. And the Hartford, West Hartford, East Hartford, Connecticut metro area. Those 2 metros are taken into consideration simply by virtue of where you're located. And that forms the larger geography that we've examined, again, for points of comparison. And for this reason, We could simply leave it at examining this 1.5 miles or even your primary market area. But when you really want to know what's going on or trending, you need to compare it against a region. Economies are regional, right? Your town is not an economy. The 20-minute drive time is not an economy. The region is your economy. As your region goes, so goes what happens inside that region, including what happens to your neighborhood and so forth, right? So if your region catches a cold or sneezes, yeah, so if your region sneezes, you will catch a cold, something like that. Next. Finally, this is the kind of the close-in TOD study area, all right? And this is the traditional, I think this is our quarter or half-mile area that we have up here. Now, ordinarily, I wouldn't be showing you all these colors, but the map I've selected is showing you just the zoning. Basically, it's a zoning map, so it's showing you what's zoned residential, apartments, commercial, mixed use, industrial, and so forth. And so, you know, that was part of our analysis to see where stuff lines up. And we've got a whole bunch of other maps, more detailed, in our report that allows us, as the analysts, to say, here's where it is today, and here's what it might look like or could look like tomorrow if things were redeveloped. So again, this is just kind of inside baseball, showing you just some of the different mapping that we're looking at. And I think that's it, right? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, do you want me to entertain questions or wait, or?
Yeah, let's let Francisco do his part.
Okay.
And then we'll let people ask questions after that.
Very good.
Okay. And I'm just going to take a second here to switch
Yep.
PowerPoints.
Thank you.
Okay, while Peter's doing that, I'll just briefly introduce myself. Francisco Gomes with Fitzgerald and Halliday. We are a planning firm located in Hartford, and we've done work all across Connecticut and really through the Northeast. I'm a senior project manager with the firm, and I'm happy to be here in Enfield. I've worked in a number of communities in this area and with very similar projects. So if we go to the next slide.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the slideshow.
Okay.
There it is.
There you go.
That one.
There we
Sorry
are.
about that.
Yeah, the next one.
Okay.
Okay. So tell you a little bit more about us. The map on the right shows the communities we've worked in Connecticut. So as I've mentioned, we've worked throughout the state. And our expertise includes town and village center planning, transit-oriented development planning, zoning and land use planning, transportation planning and engineering, bicycle and pedestrian planning, environmental planning and permitting, and public involvement in support of all those planning expertises. Next slide. Some of our recent projects that are comparable to Enfield and Thompsonville include the Branchville Transit-Oriented Development Plan. This is a village center in Ridgefield, Connecticut, in the western part of the state. We wrapped that up last year, and I've been actively working with the first selectman since then to make sure that the plan gets realized to the extent possible. Not unlike Thompsonville, it's a small village center. It's over 100 years old, and it has, everyone talks about the possibilities in Branchville and the potential that it has, yet it's seen very little change over the past decade or two. They do have an existing Metro North line, so they have existing service already, which is a strength. But we're anticipating the service that you will have here, and in that respect, we're ahead of the curve in this community because we're doing this work before your service arrives. We also have worked in Wallingford. We did a TOD plan for the new Wallingford station that's under construction and near completion. We had some very early successes in that plan. We made some recommendations to modify the zoning and some of the parking regulations that allowed for redevelopment of a site right near the station that is going to add a couple hundred units of housing in that area. and we've since worked with the town on some grant applications to pursue funding to make some of the infrastructure improvements in the area that we recommended. We also did a regional TOD study for the entire Scrog region, which is basically New Haven County, for every station in that region. And another project we've had a lot of success with, and it's a project I worked with Todd on, actually, it's a Brookfield Four Corners study. It's in Brookfield, Connecticut, and it's an example of a project where we basically rewrote the zoning and some design guidelines for the area, developed a master plan, and they now have a developer who's coming in and is redeveloping a couple of parcels on the property in a mixed-use development, and it lays out very similar to how we envisioned it and how we planned it. Additionally, I was in Brookfield a couple weeks ago for another meeting. They happened to be voting on a bond issue to do the streetscape project that was part of that planning effort. So we've had success in communities, and I think you really have things lined up here in Enfield to have some successes in the Thompsonville area as well. If we go to the next slide, I'll kind of go through, and we'll have to click through. This is kind of animated. It was really designed for me to click through it. But you have a history of planning here, and Peter, alluded to that. And really, this very much coincides with your 13 years, right? So I'm sure he remembers much of this. There was a revitalization plan in 2001 for Thompsonville. In 2005, FHWA, there was an FHWA grant to improve river access. 2006, there was an FTA grant for planning and development of bus facilities. There was Thompsonville Transit Center, a feasibility study, Transit Center land acquisition grant, a real estate acquisition management plan for Thompsonville in 2010, conceptual designs of the Transit Center in 2011. In 2012, the transit study was completed. Also in that same year, the EDC was awarded a brownfield grant to acquire property down near the station. River access plans were submitted to DOT and FHWA in 2013. There was a zoning study of Thompsonville completed at that time. Also in the same year, CT Transit initiated the Magic Carpet bus service. And in 2015, the station plans were completed. A parking study was also conducted. So there has been a tremendous amount. If we go to the next bullet, there's also been a LOTSIP grant awarded for a trail in the area, remediation action grant for a property in the project area, and commuter rail service will initiate next year, so sometime mid-year next year. So there's the community, your community, your representatives have been actively working towards getting everything lined up for Thompsonville. And we're building upon years and years worth of work. So our challenge, and my challenge in our project, is really to take the best of what's been done and figure out what's still relevant to your community and carry that forward so that we're not repeating efforts and we're not losing anything that may have been captured in the past that's really valuable. Realizing that things have changed since some of these studies have been completed. So if we go to the next slide and take a look at what we'll be actually doing as part of our work, the first item is review of those prior plans and studies. So I've had staff assigned to this, gathering all these documents, filtering through those, and figure out what's relevant, what's still applicable, and what's going to work for your community. Our next step will be to evaluate your regulations. Our focus will be your zoning. Now, your zoning is your municipal regulation that regulates what can be built, where it can be built, how big it can be, what it can look like, what kind of use can occur on that property. And our work is going to be informed by Todd, because Todd's going to tell us what the market is likely to support in Enfield and in the Thompsonville area. And I should note that we're also casting a wider net than just Thompsonville, because this area and the mall area is all really connected to and related to what's going to happen in Thompsonville. So we need to take a look at your zoning to see if it supports what the market will support, And if the market's supporting something that maybe you find is not compatible with your vision of Thompsonville, we need to make sure the regulations are in place to shape development that you want, understanding there's going to be market pressures, some of which you want and some of which you may not want. Your zoning, as with most of the communities in which we work, is 40 or 50 years old, and it's evolved over time. It's been revisited. There have been language borrowed from other communities. It's been wordsmithed. So we really need to take a fresh look at that. Because of that slow evolution of the zoning and nips and tucks over time, it's not that user-friendly. If we want to make it user-friendly so that your Planning and Zoning Commission is very capable with the language and can more readily rule on applications, so that potential developers have a better understanding of what it is you as a community want to see built in your community, and so you as a community can understand what your zoning allows as well. So our goal is to go through your zoning focused on Thompsonville, but that being said, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to have a section for the Thompsonville zone that is totally different and inconsistent with the rest of your zoning. So we're going to make some broad brush recommendations for all of your zoning with our focus on Thompsonville and the mall area. And it's going to be a document that is intuitive, that has graphics that support the language, and that help people understand what a setback is, what height restrictions are, what bulk is, the landscaping that's required, the parking requirements. And we hope it's going to be something that's going to facilitate the type of development that you as a community want, and potentially remove a barrier to development that may have been precluding the type of development that you may find desirable. So that's going to be our effort. Todd's slightly ahead of us, which is good because his work is informing our work a lot more than our work is informing his. But we have an ongoing dialogue, so we're both on the same page.
That's why we're forward planning.
Yeah, you're ahead. You're ahead.
Just saying.
That's good. Yes, thank you. With that being said, Peter, you want to open it up to questions or comments?
Sure.
Yeah, so we're going to ask questions. You can ask questions, and we'll give you answers. Just please make sure you use the microphones, so that when we put this on YouTube, people can hear what you're saying. So, anybody have any questions?
Yeah, when you talk about rechanging the zoning to do something with the transit-oriented development, what are you talking about? I mean, we've already, we have the Thompsonville Village Center Zone, which allows for mixed use and smaller lots to build on and so on. So what are you envisioning?
Well, it likely won't be radical changes that are necessary. It really may be just simplifying your zoning to make it easier to use. And in some cases getting into some of the details to make sure that the zoning you have is going to support what the market supports. There has been, the community has gone through this process just like 3 or 4 years ago. But that zoning, there was a zoning study done, but that zoning was not adopted by your Planning and Zoning Commission. So we're going to go back and look at that to see if there's anything that was done through that process. And there was a limited amount of community outreach during that process that should be carried forward. And we need to get your Planning and Zoning Commission engaged and involved this time. It was my understanding last go around they really weren't really engaged in the effort, which is why it didn't go anywhere. So I don't anticipate that we're really thinking about radical changes for Thompsonville, right? I think there are a lot of things about Thompsonville that work, right? It has a mid-density residential population in proximity of a planned train station, which is exactly what you want. It has a mixture of uses with some retail uses and services in proximity of the station, which is also what you want. So I think we just want to be thorough and go through it and make sure we're not precluding opportunities that would be good for Thompsonville. And also to make sure we have some of the safeguards in place that will protect you from, maybe an unsightly development or something of that nature, right? And your zoning's old, and it needs to be revisited to get ahead. The zoning was never written in anticipation of a commuter rail station in Thompsonville. So we need to make sure that you have that covered.
Okay, yeah, just one follow-up. Does that normally include increased densities and so on, as far as that goes?
A train station?
Well,
or-
yeah, it's the transit-oriented development. I mean, to be
Yeah.
appealing for a developer, I mean,
Yeah.
he's not going to want to do open space. He's going to want to build
Right.
something.
Yeah, that's the goal. Is the attractiveness of a train station is the fact that people can commute to work via the train station and live within walking distance so that they can go without a car all week long if they want. And that's what really makes those areas attractive. And what we see is younger professionals, younger folks now have a lower percentage of car ownership and a higher preference for getting around via transit. And that's where, right now in Connecticut, the strongest part of the market is the residential rental market. And at the lower end, with younger folks and lower priced units, or smaller units, I should say, market price, but smaller units. And on the other end too, because we have a cohort of baby boomers that are starting to retire, and it's our biggest cohort of population in Connecticut. And they are looking to downsize and maybe to shed a car. And if they can live in proximity to transit, that still allows them to get around. And in an area where they can walk around and meet some or most of their needs, they'll find that area very attractive. So the development community right now is responding to those two populations or market segments. And that's probably the strongest segment. Office right now, and Todd, correct me if I'm wrong on this. Office right now in Connecticut is not real strong. Retail is so-so. So those are the types of development opportunities or pressures, depending on your perspective, that we need to anticipate with the new station coming on. It is a game changer. You will attract interested parties and developers who were not looking at this area before simply because of that station. So it's going to change the landscape.
Okay, I'm going to pass this on to Rebecca, but I think you said that it's going to be increased densities. I mean, indirectly, I think you said that.
It has the
It has to.
potential. It's going to increase demand for living in the station area. Go ahead, Todd.
Just a quick question on the density, and what Francisco said is correct about the demand near a train station, and that you're going to have more people living in proximity, which is a denser type development. But the other reason that you get greater density near a train station or a transit center is land is more dear, it's more expensive, right? And because it is more expensive, in order for the economics to work for a developer, they need to build more stuff so you've got a box, right? And in that box, you can build a certain amount of stuff. If the economics don't work, you don't build in that box. So typically what happens is in more urbanized areas, and particularly where land is probably going to be more expensive, which is going to be the case the closer in you get to that train station, because closer in you get, more people want to be there. In order to make the economics work, you need to build in more units, more commercial space, so on and so forth. It's a question of what's appropriate, and this is where we get into the back and forth on zoning, right? We don't want to see 12-story high-rise buildings. Right? You don't want to see 12-story high-rise buildings, but there is there's a balance somewhere where both the market demand is able to be met, the economics for the developer are able to be satisfied, and from your perspective as residents, it is a project that is complementary to the area.
Karan? Oh, I'm sorry, Rebecca?
Hi. Thank you for being here tonight. I lost my train of thought.
Do you want to go to Karan?
I do.
We'll come back to you.
Yeah, I like the concept of first going through the economics of the region and how it will affect the transit-oriented development in this region. So the idea is great to start with what will it take for this to develop into a more thriving economic community. The second part is, yes, the zoning and the planning of that region will be predicated on what the results of the forward progress or planning is. So that's fine. A lot of variables that come into play. A casino in Springfield, a casino possibly in a neighboring town. Of course, the rail station money, that's a huge, big variable. It'll happen hopefully in next 10 years, 5 years, who knows?
Probably within the next 5 years.
Next 5 years. So therefore, I'm sure you'll be looking at all of those variables. The point I'm trying to make is when the final zoning regulations, after all the input is put together, it's made friendly enough for a developer, easy enough for a planning commission, simple enough for the community to understand and implement. That would be the ideal that I would be looking for in the next 3, 4 years, 5 years. This study will be completed in what, another year?
Yes. Oh, within 6 months, yeah.
We'll be done in about 6 months.
Right,
Yeah, sooner,
so
yeah.
I'd like to see all of those variables put together so that it becomes a lot less complex than what it is today, and also takes into consideration all of the future developments that go together. So I like the whole idea, and that was basically my comment.
Okay, thank you.
So simple, even a caveman can do it, right?
There you go. I do come from a
I remembered. Okay. So I just want to understand that. So you had that lovely list of all of the different studies that have been done over the
Right.
years, and the nothing has happened, and the nothing has happened. And I think the people of Thompsonville have become very frustrated with that. We do the study, nothing happens. But just so we're clear, basically, what we need to launch the hard work that the two of you are doing, what we need to get that off the paper and into practice, is for our Planning and Zoning Commission to implement the changes that they and you come up with sort of as a team. And if they do not do that, then we are basically in the continuing free fall that we've been in for 40 years. Is that?
Well, I
You know, not
would make a dire prediction
essentially.
such as that, but we do, right, we do want to see changes made
Yep.
as a result of the investment we're making in this process. So we want that to result in something. In the case of the zoning work, we would like to see zoning, rewritten zoning regs that the Planning Commission, Zoning Commission was part of crafting, that they are in support of, and that they would ultimately recommend for adoption.
Okay.
So that's what we want to come out of that, because we know that you need to update your zoning regulations just to make them more user-friendly, and that there may be some aspects where you want to change some of the requirements relative to density or uses or height restrictions or setbacks or whatever it may be. Okay?
Just to piggyback on that. So is it then, because it sounded like it, I just want to understand the process. It sounds like you will be working with them to help
Correct.
them. Okay. So it's
Yes.
kind of a partnered effort.
Yes, yes.
That's
It
awesome.
needs to be. It needs
Right.
to be. I
Okay.
think the failure of the last effort to take a look at the zoning was the fact that the Planning and Zoning Commission wasn't engaged as a true partner through the process.
Okay.
Right,
That's-
and so they never were invested in it, and
Right.
while there might be some really good ideas in that, they need to be integral to that process. So that's what we're doing different this time.
Gotcha.
Okay.
That's awesome. Thank you.
I would also say that the issue that I mentioned a little earlier, the loss of staff, that didn't help matters. We lost our longtime planner just about the time that plan was released, which didn't help with getting it, to planning and zoning and getting it passed. So changes in staff have affected our our progress here by about 3 years. So we're behind the 8 ball. We need to get moving.
I just wanted to put a positive spin on it. You're talking to a girl who lived on South River Street. Okay, I grew up on South River Street. And I was the girl that walked to Coronas and to church and to all the little stores that were there. And I would like nothing more than to have that back. And I think this is moving in such a positive way that it needs to go forward. One of the things Enfield's always lacked is that we are a bedroom town. We sit between Hartford and Springfield, and we've always fallen short. So, do I want to live in Springfield? No. Do I want to live in Hartford? No. But wouldn't I like the access between that? I sell insurance in town. We insure 75% of Bigelow Common. And I will tell you, it is young, up and coming. It is doctors at Bay State. It is students at Bay Path. It is people my age that are retiring, like you said, that said, you know what, I don't want to take care of my yard anymore. But wouldn't it be great to be able to walk downtown? And you know what, I used to walk to the mall. It wasn't, I can remember. I saw Enfield or Thompsonville in its heyday, but I also saw its demise. I saw what happened when Bigelow closed and men lost their jobs. But Bigelow was transformed, and it's beautiful, and it's serving a purpose. So I think this is awesome, and anything that you can do to push it forward, I think the people in this town should embrace it, because it will end up being good for the whole town, not just your surrounding streets. This will be a reflection on our whole town. And it will, yes, maybe property taxes will go up because maybe we'll be desirable and people will want to live here. And is that a bad thing? No. So thank you. Thank you very much. I hope this goes through.
And I think you have a really good leadership team in place here in town, between Michael, Roger, and Peter, that will take our work and carry it forward and keep it relevant and make sure that you're continuing to make progress. And and Peter mentioned with some of the transitions they went through before, there was, it really put things behind. But now you have a really core team that's very devoted and committed to this effort. I trust that once our work is complete, that those recommendations can be carried forward.
My name's Teresa Meyer. So based on your map that I saw and the concerns with the zoning and whatnot, I did notice that the building 33 North River is currently zoned as industrial and not mixed use, which is
Todd's map, because I'll go.
Yeah.
The land use.
because that's what we would like it to be, is more mixed. We'd like to turn that into a mixed-use property where we have businesses adjacent to the platform, train platform, on the lower levels, and maybe some, residential efficiency apartments or whatever on the top levels. That would utilize the train station.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know at one plan we were looking at a walkover from that building over to the Bigelow Commons parking lot to be able to bring those people access from that area. I know a lot of the people, some of the people on the residential area on that river part, their concerns are the change.
Sure.
Okay, and I envision personally, bike paths with picnic tables and nice,
Park amenity.
yeah, a little park type thing that people can go and they can grab a lunch, while waiting for the train, and then stores going up from the train area into the center of town. Drawing
Yeah.
people into the center of town. That's my vision anyway, and I think that's been
Yeah, I think
approached
that's
as well.
Very consistent
Is
with,
that-
with what a lot of the prior planning work that's been done and the visioning and what's, been documented, what's been heard from the
Okay.
community, I think it's very consistent.
So, okay. So do you have, my next question is, do you have an idea of what properties in that
Yeah, we're not
1.5
there yet.
mile
Yeah.
radius would need different zoning?
We're not quite there yet.
Gotcha.
But we will be,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's a good question. Who hired you guys for these plans? Was it the planning department? And was this money from the $100,000 that you got for road station?
Yeah, go ahead.
This money comes from a state grant for transit-oriented development. We got the grant back in 2014. As I said a little earlier in my comments, because of changes in staff, we haven't been able to enact the grant. And in fact, I'm in the process of trying to get a grant extension so that we can keep this work going. But in some ways, it's kind of a mixed blessing because we're 3 years forward in the process, and I think we have better capacity, and I think we have more information from the community about what they want to see. And that's important. We want, we don't want to do this in a vacuum. We want to do this with the community and with our land use commissions. So although it's taken a little longer than we thought, that's probably a good thing. And we have these guys, and they're a very good team, and we're lucky to have them.
I was just asking, because I was just wondering if you were representing developers too.
No, we do zero work for developers.
Well, I work for developers, but in this particular case, I can't because it'd be a conflict of interest.
You don't have any that are actively looking in this area?
No, however, let me say this. Do I need this mic?
Yeah,
I guess
sure.
I do. It is part of my scope of services to develop what is referred to as an RFP, or request for proposal, to solicit developers' attention on this project. And I'll tell you, we did the same thing for the city of Meriden. We actually wrote the RFP. We sat with the city of Meriden officials, their economic development officials, their planning officials. We helped to narrow down the list of developers who responded. We then held formal interviews with the developers.
Currently, you're not.
We're not, but I wanted to make it clear, just for transparency, at the end of this process, we are helping the town of Enfield solicit developers, none of whom we will be working for.
Just two issues. Will the development affect any displacement of the residents of Thompsonville, and where will they go? And the other issue is, can you cite specific examples around this country where this project or this type of project has been implemented and it is working successfully?
Sure. Oh, can I start with that? So right now, we don't have a specific development proposal at the time, okay? I should note that eminent domain is not a strategy we would be recommending. Our task is to take a look at the zoning and figure out how the zoning needs to be updated and modified. In general, speaking to some of the other planning work that I've done in the state, TOD type planning, we have never advocated for eminent domain, for the forced taking of property. We prefer a market-based solution where we figure out what sort of infrastructure improvements are necessary to support development. We figure out how the regulatory environment needs to change, the zoning basically, and we make recommendations for those things. And then we sit back and let the market respond to that. So individuals would ultimately have to sell their properties for redevelopment. And with respect to, are there any successful examples? I think Meriden is a successful example, and Todd has quite a bit of experience with that. I've worked in communities, as I mentioned, Wallingford, where we successfully worked with them to facilitate about 200 units of housing that replaced a warehouse. Right? So it didn't displace anything. Displaced a parking lot and a warehouse in proximity to the train station. Our strategy, see, you have a community already around your train station, so to displace people, it's kind of counterintuitive. It's working against what you want. You want a residential population community around your train station. I think your real opportunities are for redevelopment or infill development. Vacant parcels, parking lots, underutilized parcels, empty buildings, vacant buildings. Those are where your greatest opportunities are.
In terms of examples, there are literally hundreds around the country, and certainly in the eastern seaboard, and let's call it between the Boston to Washington corridor. There are probably hundreds there along different rail lines. Some of which I've had opportunity to work on, some of which I've not, I've just observed. But, and they come in different flavors. There are the small town TOD redevelopment where there's, not a ton of investment, but there's some, and it's transformed, what was a sleepy little train station. And of course there are the bigger station efforts, like if you go to Silver Spring, Maryland, where I used to work, around that station, it's just kind of blown up with development. And so there's different scales of how this works. And I wanted to address, and I just, so I worked in the public sector for 12 years before I went into consulting. All of that in New Jersey, so don't hold that against me. We do things differently there. But I know what it is to be on the public sector side and kind of try to put a deal together and all the politics and all that concern. And I've seen, how that comes together. When we talk about acquisition and people being displaced, let me say this. It is likely that some folks will be purchased to move somewhere else. Now, having said that, and again, I've been involved in a lot of these deals, it is not as though someone comes in, kicks granny out on the, to the curb and see you later. It is a transaction like any transaction that takes place, right? And the way that this works is the partnership and a public-private partnership between the town, private developer. They come together and they say, how can we make this happen, right? And usually that also involves the property owner that either wants to participate or perhaps they don't, but they want to get a market value for their property. That's how it's supposed to work, okay? And so no one is having their property stolen out from under them or they're being forced to sell. Ultimately there's going to have to be cooperation. But to Francisco's point, this is not about using eminent domain to basically force people from their property. This is showing, here's a greater value that you could have, and usually people respond to that, saying, here's what you have today, here's what you can have tomorrow. It's a question of, do you want to participate on site, or do you, perhaps want to cash out now and, relocate somewhere else, so.
I wanted to just add something to that. But I've come here from a place where rail transit specifically, was started from scratch, didn't exist. And in the city of Charlotte, almost $1 trillion worth of development have gone towards every train station that they've built to date. And it's been in service for 10 years. Just a tremendous impact. But the town that I worked in was on what is proposed as a commuter line. And what they did more than 10 years ago was actually look at their zoning and their regulations. These are fairly small towns, and some of them were mill towns. The similarities are actually quite striking. And those towns made a commitment to change of their ordinances and their rules and their design standards to accommodate not even something that was committed like what we've got. And the development that's been guided there, I've given you my business card, and if you contact me, I'll send you the examples, are truly inspiring. They're sort of the scale that Todd referenced is really important. The Charlotte examples are much higher density than what we would probably expect. But you raised the important point about displacement, because one of the things that I'm concerned about looking beyond this study and beyond the start of commuter rail service is what happens if we're successful, right? What happens to locations for people that are of low income? That's a very important question. And it's almost part 3 of this project, if you will, is what happens to the displacement of people that have come to rely on affordable housing in Thompsonville. And it is a question that I'm asking myself. And Peter's our community development director, and it's work that he's spent time looking at. He's looking at some things right now, because that is a very good question. The question isn't like, can it be successful? The question in my mind is, what happens if we are successful? And that's a question we need to answer.
I just want to throw out there that one, that is an issue, and I came from Massachusetts, which is light years ahead of Connecticut in terms of affordable housing. And one of the things that Massachusetts does is when they do build housing development, they have a set aside of like 20% that are affordable. And affordable doesn't mean low income. Affordable means that the guy that works as a plumber or works for the town can afford to live there while the property values are going through the roof. It means that the rents or their cost to live there stays at a certain level, while property values go up. So that's one example of how you can help people that are that have modest means to stay in a community. So there are ways to address that.
I just wanted to say that between Michael, myself, and Peter, we're like Farmers Insurance. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. And, Michael's been on the development side. I'm an urban economist as well as a planner. We sat together and tried to figure out the best way to approach this. And I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, which is good because we're a vision down the road. But we're trying to do this in building blocks and make sure that everybody's engaged, that we're all working together. I think you have a very strong team in place right now. It's not the situation you had before. I think everybody is frustrated from what's gone on. But on the other hand, Peter is very modest, and he says, well, I came here 13 years ago and nothing has happened. But there's a lot of things that have happened. And just take the Magic Carpet bus as one example. And if we can connect that Magic Carpet bus between the train station and the retail area. I think I just want to emphasize that sitting at the table with Michael early on, and as we did the interviews with these gentlemen, Michael's emphasis was, what are the things that we can actually do? So I don't want people to just focus on zoning. Zoning is just a mean to achieve our vision. But the market is very important. We're going to look at the market, but we're going to also say, and I was surprised even by looking at that list of things you were going through that there actually was a property acquisition strategy plan done at one point in time. So, I mean, there's a lot of components, but for some reason or other, we just didn't jump start them. And so Michael was very strong in our meetings that we need to have action points. Okay, so what should we be doing in the next 3 months to move the agenda forward, so when somebody opens the door from that train that comes to the train station, if it's 4 years from now, 5 years ago, what's going to greet them? And that's what we're all trying to work towards. I'm for one, delighted at the approach and committed to doing everything I can to move the ball forward.
Thank you, Roger. Yeah, I think that one takeaway from this is that, as I had said earlier, we've been setting the table here for quite some time. Now it's time to eat. So We've done a lot of work. Oh, I'm sorry.
Where's the pizza?
You're right. We should have got pizza. But anyways, seriously, we have been laying the groundwork for a long time. It's time to get to work now, and hopefully in the next 6 months, we'll have that plan in place, and we can start moving forward in the direction we want to go. And I thank you very much for coming out, and thank you for your time. Are there any other questions before we go? All right. Well, thank you again.